Ephesians 3:17-19, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and firmly established in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the length and width and height and depth of God's love, and to know Christ's love that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. First word we're going to look at is dwell. In the Greek, there's two different words that can be used for this. One is like living as a stranger. Think couch hopping or some kind of distant relationship of you're staying there. It's not really comfortable. It's not yours. It's not permanent. It's temporary. The word that's used here is something that is like your permanent home. Think when you're on vacation, you have a great time, but there's still nothing better than coming to your room, to your bed, to your kitchen. It's like, wow, this is where I'm supposed to be. That's what's there. How do we have Christ dwell in our hearts? Well, it is back to this. It's through faith. It's submission to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, I need to let Jesus rule in my life. I'm sinful. I'm this, I'm that. This is my blockages. This is what keeps me. I need you to dwell in my heart, and I need to do it through faith. I need to submit to the Holy Spirit. Okay. So we say, okay, now the next words we're going to look at is rooted and firmly established, or rooted and grounded, as some other translations talk about. What do I need to be rooted in? What do I need to be firmly established in? It's this. It's in love. And this is, you'll see in a little bit, this is completely talking about the church as believers. We're supposed to be rooted and firmly established in our love for other believers. That's who it's supposed to be for. It's not just in general. It's not just floating out there, but it's for other believers. Now, what are these words? First one is rooted. Think of like a tree. We had we had trees blow over in the storm last year, and massive trees from the wind and the rain, they would just lift up. And there was one thing that was interesting. Some trees would just completely uproot and they'd be laying on the ground. And their roots would be very shallow. They'd be really weak and they'd just kind of be like straight. Think of like a camping stake for like a tent. You just pound it straight down. It's just going to pop right back up with any resistance. Some of the other trees that started to lift up but didn't, just kind of pulled up from the ground a little bit, you could see that their roots were twisted and rolling and wrapping, and they were really different. They weren't just a straight shot. They were twisted. They'd wrap around rocks. They'd wrap around themselves to really be rooted. That's what our relationship with Jesus is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be all-encompassing. It's not just Sunday. It's Sunday to Sunday. It's every single day of the week. It's how we think. It's how we act. It's what we listen to. It's what we watch. That's being rooted. The word for firmly established is interesting. It talks about the idea of a building with a foundation, and the foundation has settled. Think of when they're building a house. They don't just, kind of flatten the ground. They'll pound it. They'll roll over a paver over it. They'll put sand. They'll put rock. They'll pound it down and continue to make that foundation as solid as possible. In San Francisco right now, there's skyscrapers that are very, very expensive to live in. And every single residence inside these giant skyscrapers are wildly expensive. Problem is they have a bad foundation and the building is leaning and they're essentially useless. Firmly established in our love for each other has the idea that our foundation is settled and solid. It's rooted like a well-established tree. And that all goes back to Jesus. I need you to dwell in my heart. I need faith. I need to treat each other with love. This is an amazing passage. The other is this, that firmly established in love, you may be able to comprehend with all the saints. Comprehend with. Our relationship with God, it honestly is not meant to be just by ourselves. It's meant to be with other believers. It doesn't have to necessarily be a formal program, but there should be believers in our lives that we are able to talk about spiritual things with. we're able to freely say, we should pray about that, or I've been praying about that, or will you pray with me? Our ability to understand the massive immensity of who God is, and just a sliver of it, but who God is, our salvation, what he saved us from, is done best with other believers. It's interesting when we look at small groups. Sometimes those can be like amazing relationships and friendships, but small groups, big experiences, because we're learning from each other so fast, and it's great for our relationship with God, and really trying to make sure that this is happening, that we're really understanding our relationship with God. It's going to this length, width, height, depth. What am I trying to understand? I'm trying to understand God's love and this massive plan of salvation and how it interacts with me as a believer inside of the church. Got drawing all over this place, but how does this coincide? The length, the width, the height, the depth. The length is it. When did God start loving you? In eternity past. He knew all the mistakes you would make. They say, "Oh my goodness, but I got saved this many years ago. I came to faith and believed in Jesus. I asked him to forgive my sins, but I've made so many mistakes." Yeah, he knew that. And he still forgave you. And he willingly knew all the mistakes you would make before you accepted Jesus. And he knew all the mistakes after you accepted Jesus. And he says, it's still. So looking and saying, okay, excuse me, what is the length? It goes forward and backwards. And that also goes into this, but saying, before I accepted Jesus and after I accepted Jesus, it doesn't end. It goes on through into eternity. That love started in eternity past, and it will go on forever into eternity future. The width. Think of how many people that we are going to see in heaven and realize, I didn't know you were a believer. We went to school together, but I lost track of you. And oh my goodness. And think of how many people have been accepted by Jesus that led distant lives from him. And then the height, and looking at that and saying, okay, as believers, we reside in heavenly places. This has to do with our future home in heaven, but it also has to do with our spiritual authority as believers. This love of God allows us to be his representatives and to use his name in prayer and so many other things. That is that height that we have been elevated as believers. The depth, think of the incarnation, leaving heaven, coming down to be born as a baby and to grow as a human and to serve God in that way. Jesus exemplifies length, width, height, and depth of God's love. And then it goes on in verse 19, and to know Christ's love. This is something that we miss so much, and I'm intentionally talking fast because of the length of this video. Know. Have you asked God, I want to know your love. And that it can be known. God, I want to know you more. Help me to know. God's the author of knowledge. We should ask him for that knowledge. Say, I don't want to just follow you blindly, but I want to know this knowledge that is there. And ask him for it, and he will begin revealing that to your mind, to your heart, so that you can understand more of God's character, more of his nature, and what he has for you. But God is knowable. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't ask him to help us to know him more. But what's the end of it? What's the end game? So that you may be filled. The word there has the idea of maximum capacity, of saying, I want you to be filled with understanding Christ dwelling in your heart through faith. I want you to be full to max capacity. Nobody really likes anything that's like half full. It's like, wow, I ordered a coffee and it was half full. That's really disappointing. I ordered these fries and they were half full. No, they were mostly empty. It's disappointing. And what Paul is saying here is that I want you to have all of these things. These first 3 chapters have been talking about all of this so that you may be filled up to max capacity with all the fullness of God. So look at this, all the fullness of God. But here's the question. If we're not full of max capacity, that means something's in the way. Something is minimizing our maximum capacity. Are the movies we watch in the way? Is the way we talk in the way? Is our impatience in the way? Is our doubt in the way? What is in the way that's keeping me from being up to max capacity, full with the fullness of God? And what that means, and we'll see in another chapter, is to be fully controlled and influence or under the influence of the Holy Spirit. So even right now, saying, okay, God, I want to be full and fully controlled by the Holy Spirit. God, I want your relationship, your personality to dwell with me. So spend some time asking this: God, I want to know, I want to know your love for me, and I want to know you more.